They fired me on a Monday morning, in front of everyone, without a single reason. My badge was taken, my name erased, and my colleagues avoided my eyes, as if betrayal was contagious. "Without us, you're nothing," my boss sneered, his words cutting deeper than the dismissal itself. But as I walked out carrying a box of forgotten files, I smiled inside. Because what they didn't know was that trust isn't built on a logo or a paycheck. It's built on people. And the people who mattered most, the clients they thought I'd lose, were already waiting for me. I used to think loyalty was enough. For nearly 10 years, I gave everything to that company. While others clocked out at 5, I was still there at midnight, sometimes later. My wife used to wait up, then she stopped, and I would come home to a dark house where the only sound was the ticking of the hallway clock. On my daughter's last birthday, I promised her I'd be home for cake. Instead, I was still in the office, debugging a system that no one else could fix. By the time I tiptoed into her room, she was asleep, a party hat abandoned on the floor. I whispered, "Happy birthday," into the silence, and felt the guilt cut deeper than exhaustion. Yet at work, none of that mattered. I was the man they could rely on, the one who pulled miracles at the last minute. I built products that saved clients millions, solved crises that would have sunk lesser teams. My boss Lucas praised me when he needed something, but the recognition never made it into meetings or reports. My name was a ghost in the presentations where my work shone. At first, I told myself it was fine. The important thing was the team, the bigger picture. But every time I went home with sore eyes and an empty stomach, I began to wonder, if loyalty costs everything and earns nothing, what is it really worth? Have you ever given up moments with family for work and wondered if it was worth it? One night, bleary-eyed at 2 a.m., I finally powered down my computer. As I grabbed my coat, my phone buzzed. A new email. The subject line was short, almost cold. Meeting, 8 a.m., do not miss. My stomach nodded. Lucas never sent messages at that hour, not even during product launches. I stared at the glowing screen, uneasy. Was it recognition? A promotion? Or something else entirely? I couldn't shake the sense that a storm was gathering, just beyond the horizon of my exhausted life. The next morning, I walked into the conference room and found Lucas already waiting. Beside him sat Daniel, my closest colleague, a man I had trusted like a brother. The slides on the screen looked eerily familiar. They were my slides, my concept for the new client interface, the one I had spent months refining. Daniel smiled, as if he had just won a prize. Lucas clapped him on the back. "Brilliant work," he said. My mouth went dry. My idea was being paraded as Daniel's triumph. I sat there, silent, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. Betrayal doesn't announce itself with a gunshot. It slides in quietly, stealing credit with a smile. From that day, things began to change. Invitations to key meetings vanished from my calendar. Reports I once reviewed were rerouted to others. My voice in discussions went unheard. Conversations moved on as if I hadn't spoken at all. I felt myself becoming invisible inside a company I had given my life to. Still, I tried to believe it was temporary, a misunderstanding. Then Lucas came to my desk late one evening, long after most had gone home. He dropped a report in front of me. "I need your signature," he said flatly. I skimmed the pages. They painted a picture of flawless progress on a project that was still riddled with issues. If I signed, I would be endorsing lies. I looked up. This isn't accurate, I said carefully. Lucas's eyes narrowed. Just sign it, Ethan. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. His voice was low, but the threat was clear. My pen hovered over the page, my conscience battling my instinct to survive. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about work anymore. It was about integrity, about who I was when no one else was watching. I didn't sign. I placed the pen down. Lucas's expression hardened, and without another word, he walked away. That night, I stayed late again, not to work, but to think. When the office finally emptied, I heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. I was about to leave when I caught Lucas's voice through the thin wall of his office. My heart stopped. He's done. It's time to get rid of him. Tomorrow, we start the process. I froze in the dark, every nerve on fire. My chest tightened as I realized the truth. I wasn't just being sidelined. I was being targeted. And the man I had trusted to lead me, the man I had sacrificed my life for, was the one pulling the strings. The meeting room was packed, every seat filled, the air heavy with the stale scent of coffee and unease. I had barely set my notebook down when Lucas strode in, his presence commanding the room like a judge walking into a courtroom. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Let's begin," he said, his eyes locking on me with a coldness that made my stomach twist. He cleared his throat and announced, "Effective immediately, Ethan Miller is no longer with this company." The words echoed in my skull. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Conversations froze. Pens stopped scratching paper. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some wide with shock, others quickly darting away as if to avoid catching the infection of my downfall. My chest burned, my pulse hammering. I opened my mouth to demand an explanation, but Lucas cut me off. The truth is, Ethan has become irrelevant. He may have worked here a long time, but longevity isn't value. Without this company, he is nothing. And let me be clear, no client follows a loser. The words landed like knives, each syllable twisting deeper. My throat clenched with rage. I wanted to stand, to shout that the projects that made this company thrive were built with my sweat, my nights, my missed birthdays. I wanted to throw the truth in his smug face, to call Daniel out for stealing my work. My fist tightened on the notebook, knuckles white. But then I caught the eyes of my colleagues. Fear. Pure, paralyzing fear. They looked at me not with sympathy, but with silent warning. Stay quiet. Don't fight back. If I resisted, they would watch me be destroyed even more publicly. Their silence was complicity, and it crushed me. So I swallowed my pride. I forced my trembling hands to gather my things, shoved my pen and notebook into my bag, and stood. The room was dead silent except for the sound of my chair scraping back. Lucas smiled, satisfied. He had staged the humiliation perfectly. Walking out of that room felt like walking through fire. Each step burned away another piece of my dignity, leaving ashes where loyalty used to be. By the time I reached the street, the cool air slapped my face, but it didn't ease the heat boiling inside me. My phone buzzed with messages, none of them from colleagues, all from family. I couldn't bring myself to answer. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with my wife and daughter. My daughter's bright eyes searched my face. "Daddy, why are you home so early?" she asked. The innocence in her voice nearly broke me. I forced a smile. "I'm just taking a little break from work." Her face lit up. "So, you'll be home more?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered, even though the truth was heavier than I could bear. Across the table, my wife's gaze pierced me. She knew I was lying. Later, after our daughter went to bed, she asked quietly, "What really happened?" I couldn't answer. The shame was too raw, the humiliation still echoing in my ears. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, every word from Lucas replaying. "Without us, you're nothing. Clients don't follow losers." His cruelty gnawed at me until I almost believed it. Almost. The next morning, as I sat with a cold cup of coffee, my phone rang. The caller ID made my heart race. It was Mr. Roberts, one of our largest clients, the kind of account Lucas used to boast about keeping secure. I hesitated before answering. "Ethan," Roberts said, his voice firm but warmer than I expected. "I heard what happened. They made a mistake. You were the only reason we trusted them. Listen carefully. I don't care about their name. I care about results. If you decide to start something of your own, I'll move my entire account to you." I froze, gripping the phone. My pulse pounded in my ears. Was this real? Roberts continued, "I don't say this lightly. Loyalty is rare. You've earned mine. Think about it." When the call ended, I sat in stunned silence. The humiliation of the day before was still raw, but for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope burned through the ashes. Lucas had said no one would follow me, but here was proof he was wrong. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen filling the dark room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. Starting something new was a gamble, a risk that could drag my family into deeper uncertainty. But betrayal had already stolen everything safe and familiar. What was left to lose? My hand steadied. I began typing, sketching the outline of a plan that could rise from the ruins of my old life. As the keys clicked, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, but beneath it was determination. Tomorrow, I would no longer be their pawn. Starting over was like walking into a storm with nothing but an umbrella full of holes. I had no safety net, no golden handshake, only a modest savings account, and a reputation that Lucas had tried to tarnish. Still, the night I typed up the first outline of my new company, I felt alive again. I called it Miller Consulting, though in reality it was just me, an old laptop, and the hope that at least one client would trust me enough to follow. When I told my wife, she pressed her hands against her face. "Ethan, we can't afford this. We've got bills, the mortgage, your mother's medicine. What if it doesn't work?" Her voice cracked between fear and anger. I had no argument that could erase her worry. "I know it's risky," I admitted, "but I can't go back to being humiliated. I need to prove that I'm more than what they said." She turned away, whispering, "Just don't drag us all down with you." The first weeks were brutal. I worked from the dining table, papers stacked high, calls dropping mid-sentence because of our unreliable internet. My daughter would peek around the corner, watching me with wide eyes. Once she asked, "Is this your new office, Daddy?" I forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. This is where big things start." Hope arrived in the form of an email from Mr. Roberts, the client who had called me after my firing. He sent a proposal, small, but enough to keep the lights on. I poured myself into it, spending nights drafting, redrafting, chasing perfection. Yet, just as I was ready to deliver, his assistant emailed, "The board has delayed the decision. We'll revisit next month." My chest tightened. Delay was dangerous. If Roberts changed his mind, I'd be finished before I even began. I paced the living room, staring at the clock as if time itself were mocking me. Every sound in the house felt louder. The drip of the faucet, the sigh of my wife upstairs, the quiet rustle of my daughter's blanket as she slept. I was holding their future on a thread, and it felt ready to snap. The next morning, I called Roberts directly. "I understand the board's concerns," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But let me show you why I'm worth the risk. Give me one trial project. If I fail, you lose nothing. If I succeed, you'll know the truth about me." There was a pause so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Roberts chuckled. "You don't give up, do you? Fine. One project." Relief hit me like a wave. I threw myself into the work, delivering results in half the time, with accuracy that exceeded expectations. When Roberts saw the outcome, he didn't just approve the proposal, he expanded it. "You've got integrity," he told me. "That's rarer than talent." Those words, simple as they were, mended something broken inside me. Not long after, I received a message that stopped me cold. It was from Daniel, the same Daniel who had once stolen my idea and stood smiling while Lucas humiliated me. "Can we talk?" His email read, "Things aren't what they seem here. I want out." At first, I thought it was a trap. Maybe Lucas had sent him to sniff around, to sabotage me, but curiosity gnawed at me. Against my better judgment, I called. Daniel's voice was low, anxious. "Ethan, listen, I know I betrayed you, and I hate myself for it. But Lucas, he's worse than you think. He's setting people up left and right. I can't stay here. If you'll have me, I want to work with you." My grip on the phone tightened. This was the same man who had smiled while my career burned. Could I trust him? Or would bringing him in be planting a snake in my own garden? "I'll think about it," I said carefully, then ended the call. The past whispered for vengeance, but the future demanded strategy. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table sketching plans, I felt a shift in the air. My company was still small, still fragile, but it had survived its first test. And more importantly, it was beginning to grow roots. But across town, in the glass tower I had once called home, Lucas was noticing something he hadn't expected. Roberts wasn't the only one. Other clients were following my lead, quietly redirecting their business. Lucas had built an empire on arrogance, and now he was watching the first cracks form in its walls. He wouldn't ignore it for long. The first cracks appeared like hairline fractures in glass, barely visible at first, but spreading fast. Within weeks of Robert shifting his account to me, 2 smaller clients followed, then another. At first, the company ignored it, assuming it was coincidence. But when the quarterly report hit, the numbers told a different story. Revenue slipping, margins thinning, and whispers of dissatisfaction echoing through boardrooms. I read about it in trade journals, small blurbs tucked between larger headlines. Key clients rumored to be exploring alternatives. Unusual client turnover. It gave me a rush I hadn't felt in years. The thrill of knowing justice was quietly sharpening its blade. Inside their glass tower, Lucas must have been sweating. I pictured him pacing the polished floors, demanding answers. That image alone kept me working harder, building trust with every handshake, every late-night call to reassure clients that I wasn't some lone wolf, but a man who stood by his word. Then came the call I'd half expected. Lucas had launched an internal review, digging through records, desperate to find out why his fortress was bleeding. His fury was predictable, but what he discovered wasn't. Clients weren't just leaving, they were leaving for me. That realization must have struck him like a punch to the gut. The pawn he had dismissed was now taking pieces off the board. I knew he wouldn't take it quietly. The first shot of his counterattack came in the form of an article. A well-known industry blog published an anonymous source claiming that I had stolen confidential data from my former company before I was fired. It painted me as a traitor, a thief who had lured clients away with stolen secrets. My phone buzzed nonstop with alerts. I stared at the headline, my stomach turning cold. The damage was immediate. Calls from prospective clients slowed. Existing ones hesitated. The seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, I sat at the dinner table in silence. My daughter poked at her mashed potatoes, then looked up at me with eyes too serious for her age. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you a bad guy? At school today, someone said you stole things." Her words cut deeper than anything Lucas had ever said. I forced a smile, though my throat ached. "No, sweetheart. Your daddy would never steal. Sometimes people lie when they're scared of the truth." She nodded slowly, but the doubt in her eyes lingered. Later that night, I sat in the dark, feeling the weight of that question pressing against my chest. For all my victories, Lucas had managed to wound me where it hurt most, at home. But despair wasn't an option. I had one advantage Lucas didn't know about: evidence. Months before my firing, I had kept copies of reports, emails, and financial statements that showed discrepancies. Money shuffled into hidden accounts, contracts falsified to inflate numbers. Back then, I kept them for my own protection. Now, they were a weapon. I spent the next 2 nights combing through them, piecing together the trail. What emerged was undeniable. Lucas wasn't just a liar. He was a fraud. And if the right eyes saw this, his empire would collapse under its own corruption. The question was, did I dare use it? Doing so would make me a target in ways I couldn't predict. But if I stayed silent, Lucas's lies would spread until they strangled everything I had built. I stared at the screen, cursor blinking in the draft of an email. I typed the address of a journalist I trusted, someone known for tearing apart corporate facades with surgical precision. My finger hovered over the mouse. For a moment, I thought of my daughter again, her wide eyes, her small voice asking if I was a bad man. If I did nothing, the world might believe I was. If I acted, the truth could finally breathe. I clicked send. The email flew into the night, carrying with it the evidence that could ignite a firestorm. As I shut the laptop, my chest tightened, not from fear, but from resolve. Lucas had declared war. I had just fired back. The article broke like thunder. By dawn, every business outlet had picked it up. Allegations of fraud, evidence of hidden accounts, whispers of a financial cover-up stretching back years. Lucas's name was everywhere, not in praise, but in suspicion. By the time I arrived at my small office, my inbox was exploding, some with support, others with threats, and more than a few asking for interviews. I thought Lucas would avoid me, hole up in the tower, and wait for the storm to pass. I was wrong. That afternoon, my office door burst open. Lucas stood there, face flushed with rage, eyes burning like wildfire. He slammed the door behind him. "You think you can destroy me?" he hissed, stepping closer. "I made you. I gave you everything you had, and you repay me with this?" His finger jabbed the air, trembling. I stood slowly, heart pounding, but voice steady. "You didn't make me, Lucas. You used me. And now the truth is out." He laughed, but it was sharp and brittle. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I can bury you. I can make sure no one hires you again. One phone call, and your so-called company disappears. For a moment, the threat chilled me. But before I could answer, the door opened again. A figure stepped inside, Daniel. He looked pale but resolute. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm. Lucas turned on him, incredulous. "You?" Lucas spat. "You don't have the spine." Daniel swallowed hard, then pulled out a folder. "I've had enough of your lies. I've kept records too, Lucas. Contracts you forged, meetings you falsified. Ethan isn't the thief. You are." The room fell silent. Lucas's face drained of color. His eyes darted between us, calculating, unraveling. He took a step back, muttering, "No, this isn't possible. You couldn't have prepared for this." His gaze snapped to me, wild and fearful. "You planned this from the beginning, didn't you?" "No. No, it can't be." That was the moment, the micro cliffhanger of truth. He realized he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey. Within days, regulators descended on the company. The board, desperate to save itself, stripped Lucas of his position. His empire, once untouchable, crumbled in public view. I watched from the outside, no longer their pawn, no longer invisible. Clients abandoned the sinking ship in waves. Employees fled, many of them reaching out to me for help, for a chance to rebuild somewhere honest. The tower that once gleamed as a symbol of power was now just glass, reflecting its own emptiness. Yet as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, a strange sadness settled in. I thought of the years I had given, the friendships I had believed in, the loyalty I had poured into something that had only betrayed me. Revenge didn't taste sweet. It tasted hollow, like ash carried on the wind. One evening, as the news played in the background, I knelt beside my daughter's bed. She clutched her teddy bear and looked up at me. "Daddy, are the bad people gone now?" I stroked her hair, smiling softly. "They're facing what they deserve. But remember, sweetheart, Daddy will always do the right thing. Always." Saying it aloud, I realized it wasn't just a promise to her. It was a vow to myself. In the quiet of that room, surrounded by the innocence I had nearly lost in the chaos, I felt the weight of vengeance lift. I hadn't needed to destroy Lucas with my own hands. The truth had done it for me. My silent revenge was complete. A week later, as I sat in my office, rebuilding one piece at a time, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line made my breath catch. "Partnership opportunity, global expansion." A multinational firm was offering to back me, to take my small company onto the international stage. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady, eyes on the glowing screen. The pawn had become more than a player. He was rewriting the game. Success came slowly at first, like the cautious steps of someone learning to walk again. But within months, my small office grew into a thriving company. Clients who once doubted me now trusted me more than ever, drawn not by flashy promises, but by integrity they could see in every contract, every delivery. I had built something fragile into something strong, and this time, I wasn't sacrificing my soul to do it. I still worked long hours, but I never missed dinner. I walked my daughter to school in the mornings, her small hand warm in mine. My wife, once afraid we'd drown in debt, smiled more now, the worry lines around her eyes softening. At night, instead of the sterile glow of office lights, I sat with my family, listening to the simple, grounding sound of my daughter's laughter. Redemption wasn't just about rebuilding a career. It was about rebuilding the pieces of myself I had almost lost. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a series of messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Former colleagues, once silent during my downfall, were now reaching out. Many of them had suffered under Lucas's reign, betrayed or discarded when they were no longer useful. Ethan, one message read, "I want to work where integrity matters. Please give me a chance." Another confessed, "I should have stood by you. I didn't. But if you'll let me, I want to start over." For a moment I hesitated. These were the same people who had looked away when I was humiliated, who had allowed fear to silence them. But then I thought of my own journey, the mistakes I'd made, and the forgiveness I wish someone had offered me. Slowly, I began bringing them in, not out of vengeance, but out of belief that change was possible. And to my surprise, they worked harder than anyone, perhaps because they understood what it meant to lose everything. Then came the message that made my pulse quicken. A single line in the subject, "We need you." I clicked it open and read, "Ethan, your story has spread further than you realize. There are others trapped in systems as corrupt as the one you escaped. We're organizing something bigger, something to dismantle these structures once and for all, and we need your help." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Part of me longed for peace, for the quiet life I had finally begun to build. But another part, the part that remembered Lucas's smirk, the boardroom silence, my daughter asking if I was a bad man, knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Weeks later, I stood at a podium in front of hundreds at a business ethics conference. The lights were blinding, but the faces in the crowd were eager, searching, hungry for something real. I spoke not of profits or growth charts, but of integrity, of the power of choosing the right path when the wrong one seemed easier. I told them how betrayal nearly broke me, how silence nearly erased me, and how truth saved me in the end. The applause thundered, but more important than the clapping was the nodding, the recognition in their eyes that they had lived parts of my story too. Afterward, as I walked through the lobby with my daughter's small hand in mine, she looked up at me, her face glowing with pride. When we passed a group of people, she tugged my sleeve and announced with childlike certainty, "My daddy helps people so they don't get treated unfair anymore." Her words stopped me cold. For all the speeches and victories, that was the legacy I wanted. Not wealth, not revenge, but a daughter who believed her father stood for something good. On the drive home, I thought it was over. The battles, the scars, the long nights filled with doubt. But that evening, another email arrived. This one was from someone high in another firm. Different city, same disease of corruption. The message was short. "We've heard what you did. We need you here. It's bigger than one company." I sat in the dark, the glow of the screen on my face, feeling the weight of destiny shifting once again. My journey had started with betrayal, burned through humiliation, risen through silent revenge. And now, it was pulling me towards something larger. Not just rebuilding my own life, but reshaping an industry poisoned by greed. I smiled to myself, whispering the truth that had carried me through every storm. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's letting justice speak for itself.